MetaPlanet was the best performing stock of 2024, and 2025 it's been no slouch. It is accumulating Bitcoin at a rapid pace, and it is the premier Bitcoin treasury company of Japan. I personally think that it's a very compelling story. I own a little bit of it, and I think that it has a long way to go in its price appreciation and the different products that it can bring to market so that it can acquire more Bitcoin rapidly. I want this video to sort of be the base for us to launch forward in our learning of MetaPlanet. After this video, we'll explore much more specific topics about MetaPlanet, like how their moving strike warrants work, what would a preferred issuance of stock look like from them, what would it do in the Japanese markets, and so on. But let's get started on this. And before we do, my name is Forrest Hodel. I'm a Bitcoin educator, and if you want to book me for a one-on-one session where I can help you figure out best practices for your Bitcoin, answer any questions you might have, you can book me in a session in the link in the description. So we're taking a look at two posts here from Climb That Ladder on Twitter. He's at ActuallyClimber, and he's well known within the MetaPlanet scene here for some of the different research that he does and publishes publicly. So this first post is the 21 of 42 reasons why I love MetaPlanet, and we will look at the other 21 reasons as well and go through all of them. And I'm going to also share my opinions on each one of these as we go along. So number one, Simon and Dylan. These gentlemen have been transparent, consistent, and each have their few fantastic interviews on YouTube, such as this one. This is Dylan LeClaire on the Bitcoin Treasury podcast. And I personally think actually Dylan LeClaire has some of the best talking points on Bitcoin in the past few years. He's been on all sorts of different things. He's had speeches, keynotes, all of this, and he's incredibly well spoken with the way that he talks about Bitcoin. I actually really resonate with him as a Bitcoiner. Two, full and sincere belief in Bitcoin. The company isn't using Bitcoin as a gimmick or side gig. This is their identity, Simon and Bitcoin, back in the Mt. Gox days, and Dylan has been researching Bitcoin and spreading the message for years. MetaPlanet is a Bitcoin treasury company leveraging capital markets to increase total Bitcoin holdings and grow Bitcoin per share. MetaPlanet's treasury strategy: fixed income issuance, secured bonds, convertible bonds, preferred equity, asset-backed, etc., plus equity issuance, private placement, preferred shares, convertible bonds, warrants, plus cash flows from business operations, Bitcoin income generation strategies, Bitcoin media, etc., equals goal, maximizing Bitcoin holdings per share. This is a slide from MetaPlanet. And as far as I'm concerned, a lot of these are sort of just future goals, right? This is the goal. They're not necessarily doing all of this. They don't have preferred equity yet. And they do have these bonds, these ordinary bonds they're called, which they get at 0% interest. And they're placed with the same company that does the moving strike warrants. So that's how they're able to get the 0%, or at least that's what is speculated of how they're able to get 0% debt. And that's because the moving strike warrants have an advantage for the issuer, and they're able to profit from that. So they give really favorable ordinary bonds to MetaPlanet. So this is more of, in my opinion, more of like some of the future ideas here. We can also talk about Bitcoin income generation strategies in the future as well. They do something very interesting. They sell cash secured puts, and they've been highly successful. I'm not sure Climb will actually get into this, but we'll see. 3, management in touch with community. At recent conferences and on X, both gentlemen and other members of the MetaPlanet team have been very approachable and engaged with the community, even crashing a MetaPlanet fan meetup in Vegas. Very cool. All right. 4, low debt. Last week, their debt to Bitcoin NAV was 1.4%. This week, it's a little higher, around 10%. This compares to strategy around 13% and similar around 22%. The fact that they've been growing so quickly without the need for much debt is impressive. And these numbers will fluctuate. This was on June 2nd. This was a while back. So strategy's debt is higher now. I'm not so sure what MetaPlanet's is currently, but the way that they've been able to grow is because they've had such a premium to their net asset value that they've been able to issue shares at a very accretive rate and acquire a lot of Bitcoin for the current shareholders with that strategy alone. And so what is bullish to me about that is there's all these other opportunities that they haven't even tapped into yet. I've mentioned the preferreds, but they you know, they haven't tapped all sorts of different instruments to be able to generate more Bitcoin yield. So 5, cautious about convertible bonds. Simon has mentioned at least twice over the past few weeks that he'd like a convertible bond buyer to be in line with MetaPlanet, not just interested in capitalizing on their volatility. His concern tells us a lot about who he is and how the company is managed. So what we've understood and learned about convertible bond buyers is a lot of them are these arb traders. So they'll buy the convertible bond as their long position, and they'll actually short the shares compared to the delta of the bond. And so they'll be delta neutral, and they'll wait for a big swing up, and they'll rebalance, and a big swing down, and they'll rebalance. So they're sort of, with the common shares, they're actually kind of going against you and positioning against you as a common shareholder. And that's what Simon is seeing here, is that the convertible bond buyers out there that are trying to buy a very volatile underlying company's convertible bond are not in the same they're not positioning themselves the same way as the common shareholder, and they don't have the same interest. They're just looking for the volatility to arb that volatility. So as much as convertible bonds can be really excellent at bringing a lot of capital to the, to the present, they're not ideal because they create all this short pressure on the shares. Only sell new shares when stock is up. The way their moving strike warrants work, Japan's version of the at the market, the third party Evo fund only has incentive to sell the shares today while the stock is higher than yesterday's close, their buy price. So the way the moving strike warrants work is they're basically it's a system where Evo Fund can issue new shares or buy new shares at the price of yesterday's close. And so they're only going to do that if the current day's price is higher than yesterday's close. So there's only new shares being issued into the market on an up day. So that ends up being a lot better, like the idea of like the sailor tapping the ATM on a down day on strategy. We don't actually know what they're doing there. Unlikely that they're really tapping it that much, if at all, on a down day. However, with the moving strike warrants, it doesn't make sense at all for new shares to be issued on a down day. So it's only happening on up days, which is a lot more transparent in that way and potentially better for the underlying common shareholders of MetaPlanet. And I think actually since this, there's now a premium on the closing day's price. So I think it's maybe 1%. Again, I got to look deeper on that myself, and I will get that information to you in one of the future videos here. 7, transparent share selling. You can go through their disclosure days after shares were sold and see how many and on which days. No FUD vector when the stock is read about the company hitting the ATM. So I touched on that a little bit, and this is an additional piece of information that's really helpful. So MetaPlanet, they have to disclose how many shares are being issued through their moving strike warrants. And so we can see that right away, and we can actually see, okay, how much is this affecting it? Having these numbers as an analyst of a stock really allows you to evaluate it, and the rest of the market is going to evaluate it based on that information as well to some degree, which will give it more of a fair price in the market. Proof of reserves. I personally love the transparency here. So they actually show some wallets with their addresses on mempool.space. So that's another piece of FUD from about MSTR, right? This is the MetaPlanet. So MetaPlanet is running their own node. They have their own mempool, which is public, and they have their wallet addresses that we can audit. So this is MetaPlanet's balance history, and you can see it's just unbelievably straight up vertical. They have they have their X timeline here, and more importantly, they have their Bitcoin holdings here, which is currently at 15,555. So you can see exactly when they buy, when they add to their wallets, and that level of transparency is maybe another selling feature for some people over other treasury companies. 9, no struggling company. You don't have to wonder what MetaPlanet is doing with their legacy business baggage of the prior 30 hotels. They've kept one and are turning it into the Bitcoin hotel. So if we compare this to other Bitcoin treasury companies out there, two other prominent ones being MSTR, Strategy, and Semler. Semler has a healthcare business. You know, they've got the QuantaFlow product. Sometimes it goes for their stock, sometimes it goes against it, right? They had a problem with the DOJ, they settled. That was sort of being a drag on their stock and limiting the ability for them to execute an effective Bitcoin yield strategy. Strategy twice in a row there. Strategy, the company, they have a business intelligence software company that, you know, some years does well, some years kind of breaks even, you know, this kind of stuff. I think they've been able to tighten up their business a lot. And I think in the future, we'll actually see that this is quite an asset to them. And I believe personally that having an additional revenue stream besides just being able to hit the ATM and have some sort of debt instruments like preferreds, that's going to help protect on the downside, because if they have a profitable business that even in a Bitcoin downturn can still use the cash flow from that business to buy Bitcoin, that's going to protect the MNAV level, which will also continue to allow them to participate in the hitting the ATM or the moving strike warrants in this side. As much as this is, you know, a positive in some way, no struggling company, it's better to not have a struggling company. It's better to have a successful company and also a Bitcoin strategy, in my opinion. But we will potentially, Klein will talk about the idea of the cash secured puts and how profitable that is, and that is legitimately a business as well. 10, Bitcoin pure play. Everything this company does is Bitcoin orientated. They have the license for Bitcoin Magazine in Japan and the Bitcoin Hotel in the works. So this is the concept for their Bitcoin Hotel. Their hotel looks similar to this, but a little bit differently. And then they've partnered with Bitcoin Magazine and have the Japanese version of that. Bitcoin Magazine being pretty closely tied with MetaPlanet as well, considering that UTXO management, which is that David Bailey and Tyler Evans is directly connected to, being investors in MetaPlanet, sort of, I believe, having some sort of seed fund or something like that. And their idea now is this Nakamoto company, which is essentially creating a MetaPlanet in every country. So they have those connections, and there's, you know, a little bit of crossover between there, and you can form your own opinion about Bitcoin Magazine. I don't plan on speaking too much about that right now in this video. 11, so few employees, so much value creation. With only 22 employees, they have an impressive $200 million market cap per employee. This speaks to the efficiency of the operation. Here's a post by Dylan showing how effective the market cap per employee is compared to these massive other companies. Incredible. 12, here we go. Sell puts for income generation. Late last year, they began selling put options on Bitcoin with roughly 5% of cash raised. It gives them an edge, especially in sideways and down markets, and allows them to further benefit from Bitcoin's volatility. So here we can see this chart. Q1 2025 revenues. MetaPlanet launched its Bitcoin income generation strategy in Q4 2024, which has since become the company's primary revenue engine and will remain the core driver of earnings going forward. So the amount of revenue that they've generated from this strategy is 88% of their revenue, while their hotel business is only 11.9%. And you can see here, they were able to generate in millions, they were able to generate 677 million Japanese yen in that quarter, in the quarter 4 2024, and 770 million Japanese yen in Q1 of 2025. So they're able to generate a huge amount of income. And again, I'll go deeper on this, but essentially what they're doing is they're selling puts. So they are setting aside a certain amount of cash, creating a contract that says, we will buy Bitcoin at this price, which is below today's current price. And if you buy the contract that makes us buy that at that price, at that strike price, you have to pay a premium for that. So we'll collect that premium, which is this Bitcoin income that they've gotten. And if that Bitcoin's price goes below that, they're forced to buy it, but they're going to be Bitcoin buyers anyway. So then they just add that to their balance sheet, to their Bitcoin holdings. And if Bitcoin's price doesn't go below that, that contract expires worthless, and they keep the cash and they can just do that again. So that is how that works on a very basic level. 13, They avoid crushing MNAV. As shared below in their Q1 earnings slides, MetaPlanet targets 3 to 5 times MNAV to issue new shares into. It's much more efficient that way and allows for higher Bitcoin yield, Bitcoin per share yields with the same amount of Bitcoin purchased. So here's a metric of that, the target accretion window. Now, I will say, it's one thing for a company to try to target something. It's another thing for the market to allow that to actually be reality. If MetaPlanet, starts to slow down their purchase, it's sort of there's this reflexive flywheel in a positive way. There's also this reflexive flywheel in a negative way, where if the market sort of sees them not moving as quickly, they'll move over to a quicker horse. They'll jump ship kind of thing, which lowers the MNAV and makes it so that strategy is less effective. So as much as they can target something, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what the market is going to represent. But it is good that they have that in mind at such a high MNAV, and they do have to sell less shares at a higher MNAV to acquire more Bitcoin. So it is more effective for the current shareholders. 14. MNAV volatility is vitality. Flat MNAV means no volatility on top of Bitcoin. MNAV volatility is the real vitality and is a testament both to the company's management as well as how investors trust the execution. So here is the MNAV. It's been as high as just over 10. It's had these moments of going to 2, and it's currently between, well, as far as this chart shows, between 4 and 6. MetaPlanet's MNAV is greater than MSTR's MNAV. As an investor, I want to put my dollars with a company who can generate higher yield than MSTR and much more efficiently. MSTR is the true benchmark in this space. MetaPlanet investors constantly give the stock a relatively higher MNAV. And we will see if that continues into the future, right? This is the chart of MSTR having between a 2 and 4 MNAV, and MetaPlanet having, again, much higher than that. 16, focus on increasing Bitcoin per share. Simon and Dylan mention this every time they talk. Their talk matches their actions. They've been able to double Bitcoin per share on average every 92 days for the past 13 months. Super impressive and incredibly consistent. They've been able to double their Bitcoin per share on average every 92 days for the past 13 months. So that's what this log chart is showing you. That's incredible. That is so fast. They've been able to double the amount of Bitcoin per share. That's amazing, really. 17. They were the #1 stock globally in 2024. This adds to their story and image and is consistent with their trajectory. They aren't bragging about this. They're just taking the win and continuing to execute. There is always more to do, and they are future focused. #1 performer. 18, strong growth versus MSTR. Exponential growth in Bitcoin holdings as a percent of MSTR's holdings is impressive. It allows me to extrapolate into the future. Log chart. So we are able to see that MetaPlanet is increasing in relation to MSTR. They are increasing their Bitcoin holdings relatively faster. 19, clean exponential growth. Beautiful. After 35 separate Bitcoin purchase announcements as of May 30th, their growth is extremely straight and predictable, even assuming some slowing this year. 48K Bitcoin before 2026 is doable. And this is a log chart predicting the amount of Bitcoin holdings. And you can see it's actually going below this exponential line here. And this is Climb's target here, 47,886 Bitcoin. 20. They can more than 10x their Bitcoin per share. Here's my sandbag 2-year prediction from a few weeks ago. This is the multiple of their current Bitcoin per share I think they can achieve in 2 years. All of these projections involved MNAV at 3.3 and dropping, even for the bull case, and dilution dropping a lot every month. Watch episode 2 for the full breakdown. He's talking about a show that he previously did called MetaPlanet Madness. MetaPlanet's projected multiplication of May 14, 2025 Bitcoin per share. Okay, so this is a bull case of 15.22 multiple and 9.43 and 6.15. Incredible. I mean, if it keeps doing what it's doing, these numbers all do make sense. I mean, they're projecting them way into the future, so we'll see. But yeah, 21, gaining on all large public holders. Their growth makes it look like their large players are still standing still. They were the 11th largest public company holder of Bitcoin, now 10th as of June 2nd. I would be surprised if they aren't 4th or better by the end of 2025. So all of these lines here are in relation. So they're MetaPlanet versus strategy, MetaPlanet versus Mara, the Bitcoin holdings in comparison of each of these. So you can see MetaPlanet growing against these other ones that are even acquiring more Bitcoin as well themselves, and still these ones are outperforming, and still MetaPlanet's Bitcoin accretion or Bitcoin holdings are still rising, even compared to companies that are acquiring Bitcoin as well. Their highest inflows from Nissa accounts. These are Japanese 0% capital gains savings accounts. They can contribute a certain amount each year to the account, even with as small as MetaPlanet still is. It was the #1 most bought stock a couple of weeks ago. So these are like Roth accounts in the States or like RRSPs in Canada. And there's some tax advantage to people using these Nissa accounts. And they're able to, so 0% capital gains, which is another sort of benefit of investing in MetaPlanet in Japan compared to buying Bitcoin directly, is it's more capital gains efficient. So there's a tax advantage reason even outside of a Nissa account as well. 23, investor count matters. Not just that I love how much it's growing, but that Simon and team understand why this matters and have a goal of exceeding Toyota, which has 900,000 investors. Numbers here are largely underreported as interactive brokers and others don't report individual shareholders. So we can see here there's growth in MetaPlanet shareholders quarter after quarter. Seems to be growing pretty significantly, with a large jump between December and March here as more and more people become aware of what MetaPlanet is. 24.5 here, extremely high turnover percentage to be so tiny relative to Toyota and many others. It's extremely impressive for MetaPlanet to have the highest volume in shares and fiat terms. Think speed of accretion of Bitcoin per share yield through low impact share dilution, easy to absorb. So what this is kind of saying is that there's a lot of trading volume. So when they're doing the moving strike warrants, they're going to have a very low impact with the share dilution that they do, because there are so many buyers and sellers that they are a small percentage of that when they are issuing new shares. So they have a lower impact on the market just by the Japanese style ATM or moving strike warrants that they do. 24.22, compared to MSTR for reference, many of the low volume days for MetaPlanet are related to the stock hitting up/down limits. Daily turnover rate of MetaPlanet versus MSTR. So this is the amount of shares being bought and sold. And you can see really, really high amounts compared to MSTR with MetaPlanet. And yeah, this is another thing that we got to talk about too, that there's these up limits and down limits within the Japanese market. So these are the sort of breakers. So if a stock is moving too rapidly in one direction, the market will pause within the Japanese markets. So this is hitting the up limit, typically is what it's doing. And this pauses it temporarily and is supposed to sort of alleviate some of the pressure, and then they open it back up. But there's actually this really interesting thing that happens because MetaPlanet is traded in the States and in Japan and in Germany. So there's all these overlappings, and it hits the limit up in Japan, but won't hit it on these other ones. So there's some arbitrage that can happen depending on when these exchanges are open. And it really has just an interesting effect for volume and pressure and prediction of where the stock is going on the other exchanges. 25, growing investor base around the world. The US volume alone has been climbing like crazy lately. 5 million shares days are typical, where 50K share volume days were the norm 2 to 3 months ago. So this is for their MTPLF stock that they have in the States. It's an OTC stock, so it's not super accessible, and there's also some trading fees associated with it. And yeah, it's not on like a main exchange. Basically, it's an over-the-counter type exchange, and you can still see massive volume in there. So a lot of interest in from American investors as well. 26, highest volatility stock in Japan. There's no denying that volatility is tied to performance. This stock is alive. Volatility is vitality. So stock price versus volatility for Japanese listcos, and MetaPlanet is way up in this top right here. 350% performance with volatility at maybe 180, 183 realized volatility right here. Incredible. Like there's just this massive gap between anything else, right? I'd actually be curious to see what this one was, but massive gap even between the second most performative and highly volatile as well. 27, growing X and Discord community. X is 10 times the size it was late April. Discord started late April and is over 2,700 members now. So many contributors as well. So this is, the retail side, and it's sort of like maybe retail doesn't necessarily move the market as much as institutions do. But because of the size of MetaPlanet, retail does still have a large impact. But I think more so than that, retail oftentimes will create a lot of content and a lot of interest, and that will actually bring in larger money, right? So there's the sort of retail will set the base a lot of times in these retail driven stocks, and that allows for institutions and larger money to come in, and that creates a larger bid. So this is just a metric really to see increasing interest, which means increasing price over time. 28, this is what I talked about before. Trades around the clock. Much like Bitcoin, MetaPlanet trades almost 24 hours a day during the week somewhere on the planet. The name is more fitting more now than ever. So these are trading hours. This somebody created this chart, and you can see there's only this gap here, for Chicago time between 4 and 6 p.m. There's a gap not being open. You can see the trading hours are very low for America, but they have, the Japanese markets are open here on the TSE and the PTS, which I'm not sure what the PTS actually is. I know the TSE, Tokyo Stock Exchange, and the FWB in Germany. So there's a lot of overlapping stock trading happening on MetaPlanet. 29, dominant in Asia, no challengers. They're the name people associate with Bitcoin, and their execution in the area is likely to remain unmatched. Good luck to the copy pasters. Bitcoin highlights after 210 million plan. Bitcoin holdings 888.8, ranked 10 globally, number 1 in Asia. Acquired at the cost of 122 billion, average of 13,756,000 yen per BTC, achieved 89% of 10K Bitcoin target in just 5 months, climbed to number 10 globally. So there has been some other companies in Japan that have adopted Bitcoin, but just not in the size and speed of MetaPlanet. And there's been some other copycats that have also sort of been more crypto related, which is just a loser strategy in my eyes. 30, major tax and other advantages in Japan. It's not just Nissa accounts. Outside those, the general tax rate is 20% for stocks and is up to 55% for Bitcoin. I think you also have to mail something out to get permission to buy Bitcoin. So they have pretty stringent KYC AML laws, and you actually have to have a physical address that you receive a piece of mail to prove your identity to use an exchange. And I think a lot of that is because of the problems they had with Mt. Gox being out of Japan and being getting hacked and, people losing their money and all sorts of things. So they kind of implemented some laws based around that. And they haven't revoked those. And when they do, that'll probably be a bearish scenario for MetaPlanet, because the tax advantaged side of buying MetaPlanet as opposed to Bitcoin might change when those laws change. But I will say that Japan is pretty slow at changing things. So that's further down the line as far as that concern goes. And we have some We have a comparison here between MetaPlanet compared to spot Bitcoin. So income tax rate 20% versus 55%. Holding structure, publicly listed operating company with permanent capital, enabling Bitcoin exposure for Japanese institutional and retail investors through a regulatory compliant investment vehicle. No spot ETF in Japan, no domestic options to own BTC in a securities account. So you'd have to buy spot, and there's complications to doing that. Ability to generate operational cash flow. Yes, achieved its first profitable fiscal year in 7 years in 2024. No cash flow with Bitcoin. Ability to utilize capital markets to grow Bitcoin in a tax efficient manner. Debt options include secured, unsecured, asset-backed, convertible, or structured notes. Equity options include common shares, moving strike warrants, and preferred equity. And for spot BTC, no. Ability to access brokerage margin in Japanese accounts, yes and no for Bitcoin. And I believe actually they just changed a little bit of ability to get more margin on MetaPlanet. And that's really bullish to me because, you know, a property that you can get a mortgage on is going to trade at a higher premium compared to one that you can't, because it's harder to get funding for. So that relates over to equities like this, because you can, you know, there's going to be buyers that hold that and have some sort of margin against it. It's just a more useful product when you can use it for margin. 31, hedge against yen and bond crisis. Bitcoin is a hedge against fiat devaluation and the bond market collapsing. Remember, MetaPlanet doesn't keep much money in yen. Almost all of it is immediately gets converted to Bitcoin. Yen devaluation, which, you know, the yen is going down constantly. The Japanese bond crisis, you get no yield on bonds. And, you know, Bitcoin is more and more attractive as more people understand it over there. 32, better than 0% moving strike warrants. This is first for Japan. Most companies pay a significant fee to dilute their shares. MetaPlanet's current plan has them at a -1%, which means more value is gained from new share issuance. First ever moving strike warrants priced above market in Japan. So there's a premium to market price by issuing shares at an average premium of 1%. We aim to minimize dilution while maximizing Bitcoin accretion for shareholders. So there's a 1% premium on that, the moving strike warrants. 33, 0% ordinary bonds. They have a great relationship with their moving strike warrant partner, Evo Fund, and with interest rates in Japan being 0.5%, this isn't a problem, basically pulling the future forward while we wait for them to start issuing more shares. 0%. So they're able to bring money in a form of a bond, in form of a debt, to the present to buy Bitcoin at a 0% cost of interest. Incredible, like insane. That's insane. That's not convertible bonds, that's ordinary bonds. 34, potential for negative rate convertible bonds. Simon mentioned this in Vegas. Quote, if we ever decide to issue a convertible, we believe MetaPlanet paper would be in extremely high demand, and given our volatility profile, it isn't out of the question that we could even issue these convertible bonds at a negative interest rate. This is something that was speculated about for MSTR doing this, but they never did, and it seems to me unlikely that they're going to issue more convertible bonds. Maybe way down the line, it's advantageous for them to do something like that, but the fact that Simon actually talked about this for MetaPlanet gives it a lot more credibility that something like this is possible for MetaPlanet. 35, fresh US market inflows. Initial volume in the new US ticker MTPLF is a huge sign of inflows seen in orange below. We can see here that all the blue is the 3350 ticker on the TSE, and the orange is just starting to tick up here in May. We're already in July, so you know, it would be interesting to see this graph continued here. 36, US markets uplist potential, just a matter of time if/when this occurs. It'll likely convert from MTPLF to MTPL. I think these black squares will turn orange eventually. So this is all the, in the States here, these are the different brokerages that will allow you to buy the OTC US ticker for MetaPlanet, and all these other ones won't, or just don't have it listed. And I think that it's just a matter of time before US markets uplist. So that means getting on different exchanges besides the OTC one. Maybe they could get on the NASDAQ. Maybe they could get on, you know, some other type of exchange that is more favorable and easier to list on these other exchanges or other brokerages, sorry. 37, US subsidiary taking root in Miami. Excited to see where this goes. None of my pricing models consider bonuses like this. So they have this MetaPlanet Treasury Corp set up now in Florida as well, and it is directly connected to the one in Japan. And maybe they'll be able to tap the US markets. Maybe they'll be able to do ATM. Maybe they'll be able to create preferreds in America. They can get that stock potentially in different ETFs that the Japanese stock couldn't get into. There's all sorts of other sort of bonuses, as Climb mentions here, for having this MetaPlanet incorporated additionally in the US. 38, part of growing number of ETFs. A week ago, this showed 32, now 34, number isn't going down. So these are all ETFs that hold MetaPlanet in them, and there'll be even more. And as MetaPlanet grows and dilutes, there's going to be more shares needing to be bought by these ones and the new ETFs that will inevitably have MetaPlanet in them. 39, heavily shorted. Mixed reports, but whether it's 10% on the low estimates or 25% on the high estimates, there's a lot more courage than brains out there. They are future buyers. Think of it as the same selling effect as share dilution, but with the obligation to buy back. So regardless of when or how a short seller gets into the position, unless they have, a convertible bond, right? They're going to have to buy shares at some point, even if that is when they are profitable as a short seller. So say MetaPlanet goes down, the short seller made a good trade, they still have to buy back their shares at that low, which creates buying pressure even at that low. So it's going to protect the downside to some degree, unless they don't sell and more people short on. But eventually short sellers do become buyers. 40, high Sharpe ratio. ETFs and traditional investors care about this. It's all part of the recipe for a balanced portfolio, which means better risk adjusted returns. So the Sharpe ratio is basically showing using metrics like volatility and saying that, the risk of this stock plus the return of it is going to give a certain type of metric on the, a certain ratio in the Sharpe ratio. And, we have a 14 here. So which means adding a little bit of it to your portfolio will offset, the risk, and you'll have an outsized returns by having this as part of your portfolio. Anyway, it's a metric that some investors use. 41, it's both the option and inverse option. It's the call option on Bitcoin, Bitcoin per share yield, yen debasement, Japanese bond crisis, among other things. It's an inverse theta, time decay option, due to Bitcoin per share yield and the constraint Bitcoin put option revenue. And 42 here, incredible preferred stock potential. This is something that I definitely want to explore more. It's a direct arbitrage between the expected Bitcoin CAGR, compound annual growth rate, and the yield the company must pay out. Lower interest rates in Japan make this very juicy, and even a 10% Bitcoin CAGR would make this very profitable from strategy slides. So this is strategy showing the Bitcoin torque comparison for 3x MNAV using the strike strife and showing how much, based on the increase of Bitcoin's value, how accretive the preferreds are for, they're the most accretive for acquiring Bitcoin with the lack of share dilution. So that is something that that MetaPlanet could get into, and as we talked about, 0.5% is a normal interest rate for a debt instrument in Japan. So these preferred equities started off by MSTR in America. Their effective yield when they were first IPO'd were 8 to 10%, and how low does the effective yield have to be for Japanese income investors to be interested in them when the rest of what's available is 0.5%? I think we've actually covered a lot here just by looking at these 42 tweets. I definitely recommend looking at Climb the Ladder's Twitter account if you want more information about MetaPlanet. And I will be doing deeper dives on MetaPlanet, specifically talking about the moving strike warrants and how those work, and the preferred stock potential deal with MetaPlanet, as well as some other things that might come up as I find interesting or as the news around MetaPlanet increases and continues. So thanks everyone for watching. And if you want, again, to book me for a one-on-one about any of your Bitcoin questions and Bitcoin needs, you can do so in the link in the description. I also have links for a Bitcoin hardware wallet, a Bitcoin node, a exchange, and what else do I have? Oh, a Stampseed kit as well for protecting your seed phrase. These are all things I personally use, and every single one of them has either a discount code link associated with them and or a bonus rewards for signing up. So use those links, support the show, and get yourself some discounts, and we'll see you on the next episode of Bitcoin Not Crypto.